To end the acute crisis in food and energy is for Russia to end this senseless war and to respect the UN Charter. We'll also have the occasion to address the major challenge of food security. The number of people facing severe hunger and malnutrition is rising. The Kremlin has decided to weaponize food, driving up hunger, poverty, and instability, and it's also having dramatic global consequences on the developing world, including right here in Asia. And let me be clear, I repeat once again, EU sanctions adopted against Russia do not target agriculture and food products, and they do not target the export of fertilizer from Russia. On the other hand, Russia has imposed restrictions on the export of its own foodstuffs, and even before they launched the war, imposed restrictions on fertilizers. In the EU, we are working hard to address the global consequences of this war. Is there a technical problem? Does it work? Yes? Okay. Thank you, Jim. I was telling that Russia, on the other hand, has imposed restrictions on the export of its own foodstuffs, and even before they launched the war, imposed restrictions on fertilizers. In the EU, we are working hard to address the global consequences of this war, and that's why we are mobilizing financial support of 8 billion euros to address food security, notably for the developing world. And before the war, Ukraine exported 45 billion tons of agricultural goods to the world. Via the EU solidarity lanes, we have managed to help Ukraine export 15 million tons, and an additional 10 million have been exported thanks to the Black Sea Grain Initiative. And it's important that this initiative of UN Secretary General Guterres be continued. We must also address soaring fertilizer prices and disruption in fertilizer supplies. And I'm looking forward to joining a dedicated side event on this topic tomorrow. I'm still convinced that we can and we should support developing countries to produce their own sustainable fertilizers locally, like we did with COVID vaccines. The energy crisis hurts families, increases costs for businesses, and destabilizes energy markets globally. As G20, we have the collective power, but also the collective responsibility to help make sure the world has sustainable, secure, and affordable energy for all. And in the EU, you know that we have in part based our transition strategy on reliable and affordable gas. And we need now to adapt this strategy. And we are grateful to those partners who have helped us with ensuring urgent supply. But prices need to be affordable, and we need to implement concrete measures. In the EU, we are phasing out our dependence on Russian energy. We are diversifying our energy sources. We are speeding up renewables and bolstering our energy efficiency. Climate neutrality by 2050 is and remains our guiding compass. The EU collectively remains the largest contributor to public climate funds of 23 billion euro in 2021. As G20, we should work to scale up contributions to climate funds, and we need to deliver on the 100 billion per year US dollar we have promised. It's time for the other developed partners to pay also their fair share. We are also supporting countries to decarbonize their industry. We are trying to help them to speed up their transition to green energy and technology. And our Just Energy Transition Partnership with South Africa, for instance, is a great example. We are ready for more partnerships like this. Finally, one word on health. 2 years ago, I proposed together with Dr. Tedros a treaty on pandemics in order to learn the lessons after this COVID crisis. Negotiations on that treaty are now ongoing, and this is another concrete demonstration of great multilateralism anchored in solidarity, transparency, and global coordination. Let me conclude with a word of congratulations to President Djokovic. When we sat together just a few days ago in Cambodia, both of us shared the importance of this G20 being a success, and I sincerely hope it will be. Let's recover together, let's recover stronger. I thank you, and I am ready to react if there would be questions.
Thank you, President. Ansgar, you go first.
Thank you, Ansgar Hase, German press agency, DPA. President, Russia has stood firmly alongside, China has stood firmly alongside Russia in the G20, also when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Do you see any policy change in the past few days? And if so, how do you explain this change of course? Thank you.
I'm absolutely convinced that we should try to use the meeting today and tomorrow, but also the informal contacts that we'll have in the margin of this G20 meeting in order to try to convince all the partners of the G20 to put more pressure on Russia. Because the UN Charter, the principles of sovereignty, the idea that it's not acceptable to try to change borders by force, internationally recognized borders should be shared by everyone around the table. And that's why I sincerely hope that it will be possible over the meetings that we'll have today and tomorrow to put pressure and to convince that the UN Charter must be respected by all the G20 partners.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Jason Douglas from the Wall Street Journal. Could I just please ask for your assessment of the chances of reaching agreement on continuing the Black Sea Initiative?
Yeah, this is extremely important, that initiative. I mentioned the numbers. This is fundamental, especially for the developing world. I had the occasion to exchange views in the margin of the meeting in Cambodia, together with Antonio Guterres on that issue, and I would like again to commend the great efforts made by Antonio Guterres and his team. I know that they are doing everything in order to convince Russia to agree on the extension of this initiative. And Antonio Guterres and the United Nations, they know that they can count on the full support of the European Union, because we think it's fundamental to address the dramatic consequences of the crisis. And that's why we have decided to strengthen our efforts in order to support the developing countries.
Stuart, yes.
Thank you, Baron Stuart Lau from Politico. Mr. President, how do you see the apparently warming tone between Presidents Biden and Xi Jinping from last night's meeting? First question. And second question, with China reaching out directly to Germany and France for the highest level dialogues, do you feel like the European Union as a whole has been left out? Thank you.
Yeah, two points. First of all, I think it's always positive when there is a space for a political dialogue, even if there are different opinions on many topics. It's important to engage. And in fact, it's in line with the debate we had in the European Council a few weeks ago. And you remember that we have decided to have this strategic debate. There are three important points for us from the European Union's perspective. Point one, we are determined to stand up for the human rights, for the democratic principle. This is very clear. Point two, we are convinced that it's important to rebalance the relationships with China, especially from the economic point of view. We need more reciprocity, we need a real level playing field, and we need to engage in order to make progress on that question. And point three, we had a few days ago the COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh on global topics. This is fundamental to engage with a country like China, no question. And this is very clear that for the European Union, it's important also to engage with China. And you know that on a regular basis, we have meetings with the Chinese authorities, and I'm informed that very soon the new ambassador, the new Chinese ambassador to the EU will be formally appointed.
Yes, please. Mattia.
Good morning, Mattia Bagnoli, ANSA, Italian news agency. Mr. President, I would like to ask you, what is your policy regarding the family photo? I mean, are you prepared to stay in for the photo with Mr. Lavrov? And if the Russian President Putin decides to link in with the VTC at the leaders, what is the G7 policy on that? Thank you.
A few elements. First of all, my mindset is the following. First, I would like to make the life of President Djokovic, the President of Indonesia, not too difficult. I know what it is when we chair meetings with different opinions around the table, and I don't want to make the life of the Indonesian authorities more difficult, point one. On the other hand, I intend to coordinate with our friends and colleagues, especially in the framework of the G7, in order to have, as much as possible, a coordinated approach on that questions and some other questions that are related to that topic. And point three, I believe in diplomacy, and G20 is a political space, a political forum for diplomacy. And despite, unfortunately, it was not possible until today to make huge progress on the question through diplomacy. Russia is a member of the G20. This is a fact. By the way, Russia is also a member of the Security Council of the United Nations. But you have understood that I feel that on the one hand, it's important not to make the life of the Indonesian authorities more difficult. On the other hand, I intend to cooperate, to coordinate on all those topics in the following hours and systematically when it will be needed with our friends and partners, especially in the framework of the G7.
Merve, you wanted to ask a question to Anadolu.
Hello, my name is Merve Aydogan from Anadolu Agency. My first question is actually as a follow-up question about what you just said. You said you believe in diplomacy. So would you happen to have a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov? And my second question is about the recent terror attack in Turkey's Istanbul, one of the busiest streets in Istanbul, Taksim. Turkey has long protested Western states, especially EU countries, about terrorists being sheltered and being seeking harbor in European states. So how does the EU plan to support Turkey in its efforts to eliminate terrorism? What kind of concrete plans or steps does it take to take in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you. First question and first answer, no meeting is planned with Mr. Lavrov. No meeting is planned, point one. And point two, I had the occasion immediately after this tragic attack to react on behalf of the EU and to express our condolences and our support for the Turkish people. And it shows that the fight against terrorism is a common fight. This is extremely important to be all together, to try to prevent, to cooperate at the level of the intelligence services, for instance. And the European Union has a very strong position. We want to coordinate, we want to cooperate in order to fight against terrorism everywhere.
Yes, please.
Yesterday, President Xi met with the presidency with
Madam, could you first say who you work for,
yeah,
please?
I'm Gaomia from Phoenix TV, and yesterday, President Xi met with President Biden, and do you think their talks will help to resolve the global crisis, including the Ukraine war? This is my first question. And yeah, later I ask the second.
No, thank you. I would like to repeat what I said about China. We think it's important to engage with China, and even if there are different opinions on many topics with China, it's important to listen to each other, to try to develop a better mutual understanding. It's also needed to have a dialogue in order to defend our values and to defend our interests. It's the way we see how we need to engage with China from the European Union's perspective. And the fact that there is a choice for a competition, but not a systematic conflict, is something that's positive in my opinion. And that's why we feel that that meeting that took place yesterday is an important one. And by the way, we'll have more information about what happened during the meeting in the following hours.
Yeah. My second question is, Ukraine war has a great impact on Europe as well, and also globally. And could you tell us how is the situation in Europe, and how will this war end? And the second thing is, I met the global development specialist Jeffrey Sachs. He regards that if there is no cooperation, we already have a war, and then maybe we have possibility to have more war. Do you agree with his opinion? Thank you.
First, this is very clear. What happened? Russia has decided to launch a war unjustified, unprovoked war against Ukraine. But at the same time, Russia has also decided to use food and energy as weapons, mass destabilization weapons. This is the choice made by Russia. And it is correct that there is an effect in Europe, but not only in Europe, because the energy crisis in Europe, it has consequences everywhere on the world, and the food security crisis has huge consequences, especially in the developing countries. From the European Union's point of view, we are taking measures, we are acting. We had the occasion a few weeks ago to agree on a package of measures in order to address the consequences of the war regarding the question of energy supply and energy prices. We need now to implement what we have decided a few weeks ago at the level of the European Union's leaders, point one. And point two, we condemn the escalation by Russia. Russia has decided to use a nuclear rhetoric, which is extremely dangerous and which is not responsible. Russia has decided a partial mobilization, which is a negative signal. Russia has decided to launch indiscriminate attacks against civilians and civilians' infrastructures in particular. And that's why we are trying in Europe to mobilize the rest of the world in order to defend the UN Charter. This is not a battle, Russia against the western part of the world. It's a battle for the UN Charter. It's a battle for the international law. It's a battle for the idea that this is not acceptable to try to change by force internationally recognized borders. If you would accept that, it would be an extremely dangerous precedent, which you are right, the risk for further instability and for more conflicts, what we don't want.
Sebastian from Politiken.
Thank you. Sebastian Keltoft, the Politiken Denmark. Mr. President, it is my understanding in the pre-meetings leading up to the Leaders' Summit, there's been a diplomatic disagreement between G7 countries and the EU pushing for strong text on Russia and the Ukraine, with pushback from certain G20 countries saying this is not the time and the place, this is not a UN security light. I just wanted to ask you how you see this diplomatic disagreement, and do you think it will be overcome in the coming 2 days?
I think that there is a diplomatic battle. It was very clear the recent months when we have started the different debates related to the different UN resolutions. We felt that there were different sensitivities, different opinions. And that's why it's important not to give up. It's important to be in close contact with all the countries across the world in order to explain why we're absolutely convinced that this war launched by Russia is extremely serious. Extremely serious first for the Ukrainians, extremely serious for the European continent, but it is more than that because this is a member of the Security Council. In principle, the members, the permanent members of the Security Council, they should have a special responsibility to protect and to defend the UN Charter, and with this act by Russia, the opposite. And we'll have the occasion again, this is not the first time, of course, but we'll have the occasion again in the following hours to explain, to argue, and to try to convince as much as possible. But the fact that we were able to agree at the Sherpa level on a text yesterday evening is a positive signal. It goes in the right direction. And now it will be important also to use those days here in order again to explain again why we think this is serious and why we think this is fundamental for the next generations to take today the right decisions.
Yes, please, here in the middle. Carla. Indonesian. No, sorry, Carla, over there. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, I'm Akbar from Japan newspaper, the Asahi Shimbun. I just would like to confirm whether this year G20 under Indonesia will come out with a joint communique or leaders' declarations, since there's a lot of rumor that there will be no communique or joint leaders' declaration kind of things. And I want to underline again to you what are the challenges. I think Russia and Ukraine issue will be like the main topics of this presidency. And can you give comments on how Indonesia, being a president right now under a divided world, Russia, US on the other side, G7 on the other side, will come out something for this year of the G20 presidency, which you said it's the most hardest G20 presidency ever right now. Thank you.
Yeah, on the communique, I repeat that there is since yesterday evening an agreement at the Sherpa level for a communique, which is positive. Point one, with this Sherpa level, and it will it needs to be confirmed at the level of the heads, point one. And point two, about Russia, Ukraine, I think that I had the occasion to make many comments that morning and don't need to repeat. For the Indonesian presidency, it is very important to mention that they played and they are playing a very important role as chair of that G20 meeting. I had the occasion the last month to meet several times the president. Last time it was in Cambodia, in the margins of this East Asia summit. And I would like again to commend the leadership by the Indonesian presidency, because of course, for them, it's not easy. They need to chair the meeting. They need to find a compromise. And it was said before, there are different opinions around the table. There is no spontaneous agreement on the language we should use in a communique when we have a G20 meeting, especially in those turbulent times.
We'll take one more question. Yes, the lady over there. Yes.
Thank you. It's Nadia Gancheva from Euronews. I wanted to ask you, after yesterday's meeting between Joe Biden and the Chinese president, do you think the world tension is moving from Russia-Ukraine conflict to South Asia region? And also, American officials before some months said that China is their long-term challenge. Who would Europe say it's the long-term challenge before the European Union? Thank you.
First, I repeat that I think it is good that the President of the United States had a meeting yesterday with the President of China. And the timing is not a coincidence. You know what were the decisions taken in China after the Congress of the Communist Party a few weeks ago. And you know that there were a few days ago the midterm elections in the United States. That's why the timing is not a coincidence. And I think it's not a bad timing for such a meeting at that level, point one. But we have the EU our own destiny. We have the EU our own vision about how we should defend our interests, how we should promote our values. And that's why, I repeat again, we had this strategic discussion at the level of the head of state and the head of governments. And this discussion we had was the occasion to show that there are convergent views on the fact that, on the one hand, we need to be firm to defend our interests, to promote our values, and also to rebalance the relationship with China. In a nutshell, I would say that we don't want to make the same mistakes maybe we made with Russia on fossil fuels. We were very dependent on Russia for fossil fuels, and we have today difficulties in the field of energy. This is one consequence of the war launched by Russia, but also of that dependency from Russian fossil fuels. With China, we don't want to be too dependent for the innovative technology that we need today and that we will need more in the future. That's why this is important to rebalance the relationship, and for that, it's important also to engage with the Chinese authorities.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a good G20, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Good morning.
I'm from well, the president was my